Greetings, music lovers. Rick Ferguson, rickfergusonmusic.com. It's lovely to see you. Thank you for joining me. In this video, I'm entitling Diabolical Suggestions. Diabolical Suggestions actually is the title of a piece for solo piano composed by a teenage Sergei Prokofiev. I believe he was 16 when he started writing this piece. And I want to give a little background, not only about this piece, but also about Prokofiev, because it always interests me what's going on in the younger lives of composers, especially when we can find elements, grains of musical elements in their young writing style that would then later fully mature. And that's certainly the case with Diabolical Suggestions. Prokofiev was born in 1891 to a somewhat affluent family. His dad was an agricultural engineer, really overseeing a rather large estate on the Ukrainian steppe. His mother apparently was a really fine pianist, and she had a special affinity for the music of Beethoven, Chopin, and also Russian Romantic composer Anton Rubinstein. So the young Prokofiev was introduced to this music and built a lot of his musical understanding around these composers. When Prokofiev was 9 years old, composer Reinhold Glier was brought to the estate where they were living at. The Prokofiev family was where they were living as a musical tutor. And that lasted for several years. By the time Prokofiev was about 13, he was taken to the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and essentially was tested and introduced to a number of the faculty members there. And it was decided that later on that year he would enroll. So in 1904, Prokofiev enrolled in the St. Petersburg Conservatory and was to spend the next 10 years of his life there because, for heaven's sake, he was only 13 years old. So that was a significant moment. By the time Prokofiev was in about his third year of studies there, and he had always been a very difficult, sort of unruly student, rather willful, and apparently difficult to teach, but such a personality. By the time that he was in his third year, he really started to develop a lot of the compositional elements that would become hallmarks of his style, such as driving rhythms. And that's certainly the case in Diabolical Suggestions, because one of the basic elements in this piece is just the use of the repeated chord, consistently moving very much like a perpetual motion, but an extremely chaotic and intense perpetual motion. So from almost the start, after a brief introduction, we've just got the use of repeated chords. In addition, the use of creative dissonance. So in this piece, Prokofiev really is basing that dissonance around a specific interval, the augmented fourth diminished fifth, also known as the tritone. So you can hear the dissonance in that sound. That particular interval actually has a rather interesting history all of its own. Earlier in the medieval period, if a composer was essentially caught incorporating the tritone into a piece of music, that sound was thought to usher in evil spirits. And so composers really could be severely sanctioned for doing that, because it really was at one period of time thought to be the interval or the sound combination of satanic ritual. And so that finds its way into Diabolical Suggestions, and it's used very effectively. There's one more element that I suspect might be somehow connected to Prokofiev's love and understanding of the compositional process of Beethoven, which is simply taking a rather short musical motive. In the case of this piece, we've got a 7-note motive and obsessively working with that motive in a myriad of ways. But when you combine that with the tension of the tritone, when you combine it with this incessant repeated chord motion, and then you have this 7-note motive, you have diabolical suggestions. Prokofiev made his debut as a composer pianist on December 31st, I believe 1907. It might be 1908, but I think it's 1907, at a concert in a series called Evenings of Contemporary Music in St. Petersburg, and ended with Diabolical Suggestions, and he just caused an uproar with this piece. He's really an unabashed young composer, and really, I think at this particular point in life, really reveled in embracing that role as the enfant terrible, in St. Petersburg at that time. So I want us to hear this piece. It's a fabulously interesting piece, and one from the set that came to be known as his Opus 4, a set of 4 pieces, which each one in themselves is like a little caricature, but really exploring, as we have here in Diabolical Suggestions, intensity, emotional intensity, musical intensity, certainly harmonic intensity. So I hope you enjoy this piece, and here we go. So that was my performance of Prokofiev's Diabolical Suggestions. I would certainly invite you in particular to explore as a listener the Opus 2, Opus 3, Opus 4, and Opus 12. Early piano pieces by Prokofiev. There are some real gems and just fascinating pieces to listen to. Opus 2 is his set of 4 etudes. Opus 3 and 4 more character pieces. Opus 3 tends to be a little bit more toward the good-natured end of things. Opus 4, not so much. And then Opus 12 really starts to establish his writing style, since that came from a few years later. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I whetted your appetite and your curiosity for early Prokofiev. Thank you. Stay well. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.